Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Take30 series on modern analytics framework. This is week 2. We are talking about the why and how to go and find your existing business value. My name is Jeff Spear. I run the information management practice at Ironside. So I do a lot of work in data warehousing, data modeling, cloud data migration, solution architecture, and we'll be talking through this topic today. So we did the initial kickoff for this series last week on Thursday. So if you missed that, there will be a link in the chat that you can click on and watch it after this, hopefully. And I'll be doing a quick summary as well to sort of give you the high points of the modern analytics framework and what you should be doing. And then we'll be talking about finding existing value within your organization, how to measure it, going into some detail on value in your data warehouse versus value in ad hoc reporting, and then taking questions. You can type any questions you have into the questions window, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. So here at Ironside, our purpose for the past 2 decades has been to help you use data to make better decisions about your business. We do that through a number of different approaches, starting at sort of the strategic advisory level, looking at your analytic framework overall, looking at your use cases, and coming up with a roadmap to improve your use of analytics and data. Design, including UX design sprints, as well as data modeling, creating the right data structures for your environment. Those are the 2 areas sort of this talk covers the most today, but we also do a lot of building and deploying of analytics and data warehouses and cloud migrations and similar things. We do a lot of work in governance, including master data management, and today's talk is going to touch on that as well, particularly in the area of sort of keeping track of the data and value that you have. And then we also do managed services, so we can actually host some of your environments or just help you to run them or administer them. So this is our 6-week series on the modern analytics framework. Last week we sort of talked about the introduction and overview. Today we're talking about the why, which is business analytic value. So we're talking about how to identify that. And then in the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about the what, the who, and the how. And that is in order to get value, you need to identify and ingest new and existing data sources. You need to know who your knowledge worker population is, and you need to create and foster your methodology for developing new insights. And then we're going to bring it all back together again on week 6. So to take those pieces and sort of quickly put them together, for those who may have not seen the Thursday presentation, the modern analytics framework really has 3 layers. And so at the top is the insight and value generation. And so this is where your knowledge workers are going through this process, and they're going to go through it in different ways and with different tools, and that's a topic for a future week. But they're going to bring data in, they're going to do work on that data and transform it and integrate it and combine it and generate insight. And that insight leads to some sort of value, and depending on how much that value is, that's going to get deployed in some way, shape, or form into your data environment. And that data environment has a variety of different data structures, ranging from data lakes to data warehouses with various data zones in between. And the idea is that by deploying it to that environment, you create a system for automated value delivery so that your dashboards and models and other reporting artifacts are produced in an automated fashion. And what you're doing is you're separating the automation piece from the insight generation piece. And so letting the people who are good at generating insight do that, and letting the people who are good at automating data do that. And that means you get more insights and more value more quickly, and sort of both sides of this are optimized. And so that's really the goal of the modern analytics framework. And today we're going to be talking about sort of the role of value within that framework. So we think about where existing value is. There's a few main places that you want and need to go look for it. The first is your data warehouse, if you have one, or data marts or similar reporting environment. And the data warehouse is a great place to go look because it's going to generally have high quality and well understood data. To get into the data warehouse, data has to go through a lot of steps, a lot of thought is applied, a lot of development work is applied. And so generally speaking, the data there is going to be of higher quality, more refined, more integrated than most, than your average data source. That doesn't mean it's perfect, of course, and there are reasons why it may be out of date, and there may be sort of quality issues that have crept in, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. But that's the kind of data you're going to find there, and you're also going to find a lot of business logic and transformations, because that's what you do in the warehouse, is you figure out the right structure to present data to users and integrate and transform the data until it is in that structure. You also want to go out and look at ad hoc reporting data. And so this is, people who do reporting that is sort of off the map, or at least off the map from a data warehouse perspective. And this can be using tools like Click or Tableau. This can be using tools like Excel and Access. This can be using SQL scripts. And this usually happens because there are demands that, for whatever reason, the data warehouse is not meeting. And so people will say, hey, I really need this report. And someone will use whatever tool they have on hand to generate it. So usually what you're going to find here is data that is more current and probably high demand. And often what you may find is data that has not been integrated into the warehouse is integrated here. So a good example is, a company builds a warehouse and then they acquire another company or a subsidiary. And that, the process of integrating their data into the warehouse may take a while to happen, may get deprioritized. And so in the meantime, someone, pulls up another tool and brings some relevant data together, generates a report. That report's in high demand because it brings together two data sources that are otherwise hard to compare. So finding those types of reporting data is super important. For both of these data sources, though, there are a couple ways that the data gets translated into something that people can use to act and actually drive actions and drive value. And typically that's going to be analytics. So looking at your existing report inventory, whether that's in Cognos or Tableau or Power BI, is the next place to look for value. And report gets distributed to people. People look at it. People see a trend. People take action. That's what value is. So understanding which reports are in high use, which reports are driving key business actions is a critical way to find value. You're also going to find probably more business logic and transformations here, and that's for the same reason that you may, that ad hoc reporting data exists. There may be transformations, things that arise, that the warehouse hasn't incorporated yet, and so they'll get brought into the reporting layer. And so understanding that, hey, we did a join here, or we changed this calculation, or we did this aggregation because it's now important, is key to understanding what's valuable in your data. And then the last place is machine learning models. And other ML artifacts. They are identifying insights and patterns in your existing data in a way that typical analytics cannot. Hopefully they are deployed and are providing real business value, but even if they are not, that value is there, and the work that went into creating that model can be deployed and distributed to a broader audience. We think about how to measure business value, and this slide is taken from a project that we presented to a Fortune 500 client about going out and sort of measuring their existing business value before we did some delta work to improve things. So you want to identify quantitative and qualitative business benefits. Obviously the best value you can find is, we do X and that saves us Y amount of money every time we do it. That's the best type of business value. It's easy, everyone understands what it means. That's the best kind of quantitative value. But obviously there's qualitative benefits as well, and measuring those is equally important, even if it's more challenging. And those benefits can be related to a variety of things, process improvements, efficiencies, and other types of things based on how the data is being used today. So in order to do that, we go out and we need to know what stakeholders want to do. What are their business objectives? What do they see as the goals that the data and analytics are allowing them to do? We break that down into use cases. We talk to people who own the data, who own the use cases, who are experts with the data, to understand those things, see what the benefits are, what metrics are they using, and what assumptions are sort of built into those processes. And from those interviews, we can codify, the qualitative benefits and get a better sense of what value is being derived, and then turn that understanding into models that we then sort of go back and validate with the right people to make sure that we didn't miss anything, and then present that in a document. And so this is the kind of advisory or strategic engagement that we do to help you measure business value. And obviously, we're happy to do that for you, or it's something that you can take on yourself. But the important thing is that you go out and understand what types of value your analytics are returning today. So this is an example of what one of those models might look like. And so in this, we have broken down the analytic return into a variety of work streams. Those work streams have been categorized, and then for each category, the cost and the benefit is shown here. And so those costs are including everything from hardware and software, implementation, as well as labor and other related costs. And so this is a great way to sort of say, yeah, here's where we're seeing high benefits, here's where we're seeing high costs. You can see in this example, adoption of a modern data platform is driving a tremendous amount of benefit. And so this is a compelling numeric argument for switching to a modern analytics platform based on a series of interviews and raw data and modeling of cost benefits. So this is the kind of case that you can make to update your analytics framework into something that is more suited for today's data environment. So anything that drives action is business value. As we just talked about, you can measure it using objective ROI or subjective benefits. The example that I like to use in talking about this is we were working with a manufacturing client in the Midwest, and they were bringing to their organization a report on their manufacturing pipeline. So they had, it was a company that made things, and they had a couple different processes, but generally those processes fell into a series of 6 buckets. And so, they would acquire raw materials, and there were a couple of manufacturing steps. There was quality control, there was warehousing, sort of sat in inventory, there was shipping, and so for all of those things, they were gathering data. How many orders do we have coming in? How many are we shipping out? How many things pass quality control? How many are sitting in the warehouse? And it was a series of charts that would show that sort of over time, so they could look and see what either the past numbers were or projected future numbers were based on how things went. And so it was a very good way to look at their manufacturing pipeline and understand where things were and where they were going. And that had some very specific quantitative ROI benefits. For example, they could say, oh, we have way too much of this raw material based on the orders coming in, so we don't have to order any. That's a numeric savings. We're holding too much in the warehouse. Let's cut back on that. Pay less in warehouse fees. But at the same time, the fact that that stuff was being monitored, and everyone, the managers in charge of each of the steps in that process, knew that sort of the flow of those steps were being monitored, meant they had an incentive to do sort of lots of sort of mini optimizations to make things flow more smoothly, so that things that never really rose to the level of the director understanding what was going on, other than that, hey, this step is producing more than it used to, we have higher capacity, we can have more throughput. So those sort of more qualitative benefits show up as well, all being driven by a single analytic report. So when you go to look at value in a data warehouse, there's a certain kind of value you're going to see and some certain risks you're going to see. And so you have to think about how you approach it. Data warehouse, the whole point of data warehouse is to be a center for value, right? The whole point is to put data in a format that makes it easy for people to pull it out and derive value. It's also the place where the people who drive automation, those are the people who run and maintain the warehouse, because a data warehouse involves a lot of data integration, ETL, ELT, scripting, jobs, automation to take the data from wherever it lives, transform it, and put it in the right structure in the warehouse. And so, usually the highest skill set for automation is going to be on the data warehousing team. That being said, data warehouses take a lot of work to build and maintain, which means they don't change as quickly. And so that means that when you look at data in the warehouse, it's not guaranteed that the data that's in there is providing value. It may have been valuable, but requirements changed, or the source data changed, or new data came in to the organization and didn't get integrated. And so it's possible that there are some reports, there's some schemas, there's some sections of the warehouse that are out of date and are losing value or completely out of value. And so it's important to understand that, to talk to the people who are using the data as well as people who are generating the data, to make sure that you understand, this part is super current and good, and this part maybe it needs some refreshing. And that's just a part of the natural evolution of a warehouse. And so you can also look at that by talking to power users and looking at report usage stats. Report usage stats aren't the be all and end all, because people may be looking at reports and then, even though they don't provide a whole lot of value, but it gives you a starting point. It lets you know who you should be talking to. And certainly if a report is not being used at all and the data behind it is not being used, that's a strong indicator that something needs to be done to refresh or sunset that data. The typical challenge when with data warehouse value is excessive automation. We talked last week about you want to find a balance between sort of ease of getting data in and ease of getting data out. And a data warehouse makes it very easy to get data out, but that comes at the cost of a lot of work to get the data in. And so it may be the case that not everything in the warehouse needs to be there. There was a period of time, and I'm sure it's still happening, where we would go to a company and say, okay, great, what do you want in your data warehouse? And they would say everything. Okay, that's something that you can do, but that means you're spending all of that time to automate all of the data that the company has and put it in the warehouse and model it and structure it and create a reporting layer for it. And if it's not all of equal value, you probably shouldn't be spending that much effort on all of the data. So it's entirely possible that your warehouse is going to have things that are automated to a degree that you don't need them to be. And as we talked about before, some of the data may be out of date just because it takes more work to update the warehouse, and so it's possible that work is being deprioritized or isn't being done as in a timely manner. On the ad hoc side, ad hoc reports are pretty much the opposite of that, right? They can change. The whole point of them is that people, you may have a power user who, they know a tool, and maybe it's not the official company tool, but they know how to use it and they know how to answer a question, so they go and answer it. As the audience says, oh, well, hey, can I get this version of my data has changed, or I have a new assumption? Sure, here you go. And they'll tweak the report or make a copy of the report. So these ad hoc reports are often going to be very up to date, very tailored for their audience, and will include sort of very fine-grained business logic that may not have made it to the warehouse yet. And usually the people who are making these things are the people who are generating insights. These are your knowledge workers. These are the people at the top of the analytics framework diagram, and you want them to do this. You want them to keep doing this work because they're clearly good at it. If they have these ad hoc reports and they have an audience, they've managed to communicate that insight and translate it into value that people are acting on. Unfortunately, sometimes those reports get complicated over time. They tend to grow organically. People will say, can you change this? Can you change this? Can you change this? And so what maybe started off as a simple report becomes more and more complicated. There will be multiple copies that will grow. Often, you will see, someone started with, a spreadsheet or a Tableau dashboard, and they added and added and added to it. And now there's 50 or 100 of them, and they're all being refreshed, even if only 10 of them are really in high demand or are of broad value. So, these reports often have insufficient automation. They're often run by people who are good at generating insights, but not as good at the process of automation. And that makes them harder to maintain. They're usually less documented, they're usually more complex, and there's often manual steps involved. And so that means these people who are really good at generating insights are spending some of their time doing manual maintenance of these reports, which takes away from their ability to generate more insights. So finding the value here and finding things that, hey, we should probably automate this, put it in the warehouse or put it in some sort of data structure that provides the same value and frees up the time of these people to go find the next new insight. So while you're doing all this, you should be keeping track of it. You should be writing it down. You should be creating some sort of inventory of what data assets you have. And if you already have such an inventory, this is a great time to update it and make sure it's current. Maybe make sure it includes some notes on sort of what's important and what's less important. Any documentation that's kept up to date is better than no documentation. You don't have to be, you don't have to document down to every single last field. Even high-level documentation of, ordering data is here and customer data is here, but if you want super up to date, you go here, even though it's a little more raw. That kind of information is invaluable for people who have to make a new report because it helps them find, where the data they need is, and it helps them understand any restrictions or quality issues that it might have. And so what you want to do is, use this opportunity of sort of going through your systems, finding value to start the governance process of managing your data, your metadata, and possibly creating a data catalog. It's important to remember that, any sort of governance operation involves people, involves processes, it involves tools. You need to, it needs to be an acknowledged role of someone or someone's to gather this data and keep it current. They need to have methods for doing so that everyone understands and agrees upon. So if a new data source shows up, whose responsibility is it to add it to the list and go through it and look at the quality and evaluate it and make sure everyone, and talk to people who are the experts about what it means. And when you have those things, there probably are tools like Elation, data cataloging software, which can help with that. But the tool is not the answer. The tool is a means to assist you with the processes that you defined and make sure the people that you put in that role are able to do their job as efficiently as they can. So it's usually good to start with the people and processes, and then when you have a sense of what the job is, then you can find the right tool that makes that job easier. So today is talking about the why. So I want to talk quickly about the why behind the why. Like, why is business value important? Or why is looking at my business value, my existing business value important? The first is just that it helps you bring that value to the largest audience. There are probably reports, dashboards, models that exist now that some people are using, but that more people could be using. Often you'll have an ad hoc report where a smaller subset of people use the data, but if that were automated, a wider set would be able to use that same data or some of the calculations that it relies on, to create consistent analytics and drive value for the organization. This is going to help you start migrating to a modern analytics framework as you understand who your knowledge workers are, what levels of automation you have, and you can start thinking about how do I need to structure my data into different zones. And then it will help you prioritize automation and sunsetting. Maybe there are things in your in your current environment that, hey, okay, this we don't really need this anymore, so we can, at some point retire this section of the warehouse. And then start thinking about new solution architectures. So we often promote, cloud, cloud framework for these kind of solutions, and in part because it's a great way to do an incremental build to a modern analytics framework. You can take some net new analytics, put them in the cloud using tools like Snowflake or AWS. It's very easy to incrementally build some analytics there. You pay for what you use, so there's not a lot of initial overhead. You can scale it up over time, and it's a great way to say, here's sort of the new way of doing things, and then you can think about how you want to migrate things or rebuild things or what makes sense as you have a sense of what's valuable and what's not. So that's really why you want to be doing this, because in the end, the more that your value is understood and communicated and propagated to your organization, the more return you're going to see from it. So in summary, to move to a modern analytics framework, you need to understand value, and in particular the value that you have in your organization right now. Value in data warehouses often involves high automation, but has a high risk of falling behind. Value in more ad hoc reports are going to be very current, but likely to be insufficiently automated. And so balancing those two things is a critical piece of a modern analytics framework. They both are going to have valuable content. They're both going to have less valuable content, and you need to take a hard look at everything and understand what the value is of each piece of analytics that's being generated. And while you're doing that, this will allow you to create a process for cataloging and prioritizing your data assets. Data is changing, data is coming in, so this is not a one-time exercise. This is something that is ongoing, and the sooner you start turning that into a process, the sooner you're going to be able to adapt to changing data and new data sources. So that's the talk about value this week, and I think we have a few minutes for questions.
Terrific. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that discussion. And anybody that has any additional questions, please feel free to type them in. And Paul, would you like to join us on the webcam? Paul leads our advisory practice.
Good morning, everybody.
Terrific.
Thank you for that.
So we do have a couple questions. I think, Jeff, this one's probably for you. Are there other places to look for analytic value? And what about external data sources?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I talked about, sort of the extremes, like the ad hoc reports, data warehouse. You will have other places that reporting is derived from. Operational reporting coming directly from source systems. People may have made sort of other types of mini data marts. You want to look at everything. But really, it's sort of when you go out and start talking to stakeholders, if there's a source of value that you don't know about, you're probably going to hear about it pretty quickly. External data sources are a good example, and sometimes those are brought into a warehouse and you can analyze them that way. But sometimes people are going outside the organization to find them, and yeah, you want to make sure those are identified and cataloged as well.
Terrific. And Paul, this seems like a really long process. How long does this all take?
Depending on what endpoint of the process we're talking about, if it is, as an example, the ability to develop a slide that was number 10 that Jeff showed there, which was the economic model, that's really a function of the size of the organization and the number of functions in the organization that you want to bring into the analysis. Our own point of view is that you cast a wide net and you do this from an enterprise perspective. And in that case, it's a function of how large your enterprise is. As Jeff mentioned, it is a series of interviews that are conducted by business leaders within functions and lines of business that drive out an understanding of key metrics, business processes, the underlying data sets of those, and the use cases. And so that can range anywhere from a small organization, from 3 weeks to a large organization to 3 months.
Thank you. Another question, data warehouses require so much work. Are they worth it?
That's a good question, and I think pretty much if not every year, every couple of years, there's the series of our data warehouses dead articles that come up, and the answer is that they are definitely worth it, and the reason that they're worth it is that most organizations have a fairly large audience of business users who are not data experts, who are not power users, but who have a need to generate and use reports. And that's who data warehouses are ideal for, because it presents the data in a very easy to consume manner. It lets them do drag and drop reporting. It lets them put things together that are hard to put together otherwise. And so it drives analytic value for that audience. So, and this is why when we talk about knowledge workers in an upcoming week, if you don't have a lot of those people, which is rare, then maybe data warehouses are less important for you. But they have a lot of benefit. It's just that they have a lot of cost as well. And so you just need to balance those and make sure that the data you're putting in is data that is high value.
Debbie, I don't know if there's a question, but I'd like to add just one comment to clarify again something that is important about the length of time that this work takes, and that is, remember, the objective at the end of the day is Jeff's gone through with a very coherent discussion about how you discover value. Those values need to translate into initiatives ultimately. That is, what actions do you take as a result of finding certain deficits in value. And so keep that in mind. It's not just a matter of defining the value, it's a matter of defining the actions that you therefore need to take to, and particularly if it is to adopt components of a modern data platform or modern data framework. And therefore, when Jeff went through the discussion of value, those actions will have a set of costs associated with them, as well as a set of benefits. So we talked a lot about the benefits, but just recognize that in that process, you're looking at initiatives that need to change and the investments required in those initiatives, as well as the understanding the value itself of those changes.
That's very true.
Thank you. I'm going to just tee up one last question, and then we can sort of summarize what's coming in the next couple of weeks in this series. But why is it good to put new analytics in the cloud?
I mean, it's good because it is incremental and flexible. So when you're trying out something new, it's a great way to say, okay, I'm going to put this up, and if it works, then I can scale it up easily. And if it doesn't work, then I can shut it down, and I didn't put a lot of investment into it. Cloud is very popular for that reason. It also is great, if your people are already distributed, then having stuff in the cloud really doesn't, you don't take that hit. That being said, if you have a large on-premise, data center or similar installation, then maybe you can use that as well. It's not like you have to be in the cloud, but the cloud definitely has some benefits and reasons to go there.
Thank you. Jeff, do you want to wrap it up? And just remind everybody that I did put in the chat window the video from last week's, if you have an opportunity to watch it. And we will be taking all the recordings and putting them all on the website as the series progresses.
Yep. So so Thursday we're going to have Take30 with a BI expert talking about the new version of Cognos Analytics. And then we've got some other Thursday talks coming up, as you can see on the screen. And then next week, Tuesday, we're going to be doing week 3 of Modern Analytics Framework. We're going to move sort of more into the what, and then in week 4, the who, but talking about sort of knowledge workers, as well as the what the data structures look like that you create sort of in between data lakes, data warehouses, and how you understand which one is appropriate for you. And so look forward to seeing you all again on Thursday and next week. And thanks very much, and have a good day.